It's time for the Douglas Coleman Show. Mr. Smooth and Savvy is joined by guests from all walks of life, from the entertainment industry to authors to political and social commentators, the famous and not so famous, the controversial and the light and fluffy. We have it all. Now, here's Douglas Coleman.
Well, hello there. Heidi ho there. Welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show. It's me, Douglas Coleman. How are ya? John Edward is here today. Most of you know who he is. He is a psychic medium who had a show called Crossing Over on the Syfy channel. Currently, he has a web series called Evolve, which is in its 13th season, so he tells me. And also a Facebook watch called The Psychic John Edward. So very excited to have John on. After the interview with John, we've got our usual MusicSubmit.com weekly playlist. And we've got 3 tracks to play today, starting with In a Soldier's Stance by Jonathan Steele, and followed by Shake the World by Behind the Machine. And to wrap it up, Troubles Come in Threes by Joey Stuckey Trio. We're still running our complete radio promotional package for indie musicians. Please check it out on our website at douglascolemanmusic.com/CRPP. It's a very good deal. Your track will air 28 times a week for a whole month. You'll get a feature on our website. And once the promotion is over, that whole month worth of shows will permanently archive, and your song will remain in the historical archives of the Douglas Coleman Show forever. So please check it out, douglascolemanmusic.com/CRPP. We will be right back with John Edward.
You're listening to Mr. Smooth and Savvy right here on the Douglas Coleman Show. We'll be right back after these commercial messages.
DJC Music and DJC Productions are pleased to announce a brand new website. We have started a listing website for radio show hosts as well as potential show guests. This is a meeting site where hosts and guests can come together. Show hosts can list their show and types of guests they're interested in booking. Potential guests can list their talents, bio, accomplishments, or anything they feel makes them an interesting radio show guest. There are no recurrent payments, only a one-time $5 listing fee. Your listing will stay up until you decide to cancel. Previous guests of the Douglas Coleman Show are welcome to submit their guest listing free of charge. Go to radiohostsandguests.com. That's radiohostsandguests.com.
Acclaimed author of Garden, Jane Yates brings you the first book in a new trilogy, Octopus Pirate, a story of a foundling who has unusual talents, such as the ability to communicate with octopuses. As a baby, he was washed up on an island off the Scottish mainland. An eccentric former nun who lives alone with cats brings him up. He joins a circus and narrowly escapes plots against him, flees to Cornwall, builds a replica pirate ship that's also an airship to travel back in time to fight real pirates. Get your copy today from Amazon, only 99 cents.
Tired of living in a culture of lies, fake news, and alternative facts? The Pro-Truth Pledge reverses the tide of lies by calling on politicians, and everyone else, to commit to truth-oriented behaviors. The pledge asks signees to commit to 12 behaviors that research in behavioral science shows lead to truthfulness, such as clarifying one's opinions and the facts, citing one's sources, and celebrating people who update their beliefs toward the truth. Private citizens who sign the pledge get the benefit of contributing to a more truth-oriented society. Public figures get more substantive rewards for signing the pledge in the form of positive media and public recognition. The pledge crowdsources the truth by asking volunteers to evaluate the statements of public figures who sign the pledge. Take the pledge, Demand that your elected representatives do so, and encourage your friends to take it at protruthpledge.org.
Hey guys, looking to add something fresh and new to your listening lineup? Well, go ahead and check out The Douglas Coleman Show. It's a syndicated talk and music show that features fascinating and sometimes famous guests from all aspects of the entertainment industry. The topics can range from light and fluffy to sober and serious. Their focus is on music artists, but they also feature actors, filmmakers, screenwriters, authors, and even promoters. The Douglas Coleman Show. Sometimes chat, sometimes music, always entertaining.
And now...
Hey, Rocky, watch me pull a rabbit out of my hat.
Again?
Nothing up my sleeve. Presto! No doubt about it. I gotta get another hat.
Now here's something we hope you'll really like.
Okay, please welcome to the Douglas Coleman Show, John Edward. Hi, John, how are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for coming on the show. I appreciate it. I think most people know who you are, at least in the United States. Did you have an international following when you had your TV shows?
I did. I did. I didn't really travel a lot extensively to non-English speaking territories, but I do travel and tour to like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, South Africa.
Okay. All right. Well, for the few that may not know who you are a psychic medium and a TV show host. You had a couple of TV shows, one crossing over 2001 to 2004 and Cross Country 2006 to 2008. What was the difference between those two shows? I've seen Crossing Over, but I've never seen Cross Country.
Not much, to be honest. And here's the funny part. When I left Crossing Over, when Crossing Over was done, I thought I was done with television. And then the We Network contacted me and said, we'd like you to come on the show, come and do a new show, but we don't want it to be Crossing Over. And I said, okay. I said, I wouldn't really want to do Crossing Over. I kind of did that. They said, well, maybe we'll take a look into what it's like to be on the road with you. So they picked a couple of cities, and the basis of the show was they travel with me for the first season, and it was crossing over in San Antonio or Los Angeles or wherever we filmed the show. Well, the reactions that we got from it was people really wanted a studio. So by season 2, I was kind of off the road and back in a studio. So I say Cross Country wound up becoming Crossing Over Light.
Well, why were people?
That's what it felt like.
Why were people so keen for a studio? I mean, what's the difference?
Funny you should ask, because I like to always ask people questions. Like when I'm doing on the road stuff, I potentially might do another television show. So I go to the audiences and go, "What do you guys want to see?" And it's really fascinating what their responses are. So I would always ask questions like, "Hey, do you guys like Crossing Over or Cross Country better?" And it boiled down to the fact that people appreciated the studio environment because they could imagine themselves being there. Whereas if I was in San Antonio, they couldn't imagine themselves being in San Antonio, so they felt excluded, not included. And we also found that in the second show. In the first show, we did follow-ups. Well, the producers did follow-ups. In the second show, I did the follow-ups. So I might do a reading with somebody in Phoenix, and then after the event, go home with the person, and they would literally sit down and show me the photos and family video that would be included in part of the piece. So put more of me in it, which the producers thought people would want. Nope, not so much. They actually decided that they didn't really want to see me go home with the people. It annoyed them. And the reason why it annoyed them is it felt like that person got me twice now. So it made the audience turn. So we had to take me out of the follow-ups, and the producers had to be the ones to do the follow-ups. And it started to become funny because when the people knew that I was going to do the follow-up, I would get to their house and there would just happen to be 10 other people there, just in case somebody else was going to come through. So it became non-productive on one aspect, but the audience they're very, very specific in what they like and what they don't like. So I know that if I go back and do another show, I have a battle on my hands because TV is going to want me to read for celebrities, and my audience has made it clear from Australia to the UK and all across the United States and Canada, they do not want to see me sitting with a celebrity. They want to see me sitting with regular people because they feel like celebrities get enough. Exactly what they tell me, and it's consistent. There's only been one part of the country that was open to celebrities, and that was in Washington State and Oregon. Those are the only two places that gave me a little bit oh yeah, that would be cool. Everybody else is no,
Okay, so on Crossing Over, you never had celebrity guests. It was just ordinary people guests.
No, we did.
Oh, you did?
No, we did. We did have celebrities. It was my least favorite thing to do.
Why were celebrities different than ordinary people?
I think reading celebrities are harder. I think that they come with an extra layer of ego on different levels. You know, ego insecurity, ego don't you know who I am? Like, you know, kind of like the balance act of both sides of that word. But there's also so much about them that's public. Like, they're out there. They're celebrities.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
It's harder to read. So like for me, I'm very OCD. So like when I do certain things, like when I read for someone, I like information and factual stuff. So if I know that I'm reading for a family member or a friend of a family member where there's some type of connection, I always ask whoever's coming through, make sure you give me information that the people that I know don't know, so that the people that I'm reading know that there's no possible way that they could have told me. I always feel like it's important to protect the integrity of the experience. So if I'm like that with family friends or people that I'm connected to, now add a level of celebrity in. It's just harder. It's just not it's not something that I enjoy doing. It's not for me.
I think people also are going to be a little skeptical if it's a celebrity that, you know, you've talked in advance and there's something going on behind the curtain.
Right.
Ordinary people might be less susceptible to that kind of suspicion.
So one of the things on Crossing Over that I implemented, I had just gotten done doing the University of Arizona studies. They did like a series of testing, 3 that I had been part of officially, and all that's written about in a book. But one of the things that they did there is they did part of their double-blind study was to make sure that the medium didn't see the sitter, so they would put the sitter behind us. So I decided that it would be cool to put the celebrity behind me. So I would be sitting on the studio set, and then the celebrity would walk out and sit behind me. And they all thought it was great for dramatic effect, but for me it was great because I didn't have to see who was sitting there, and they could only say yes or no to me. So I didn't know who I was reading. I just gave the information, and they either got it, you know, or they didn't get it, or they got it later. And then there was the reveal where I would turn around and hopefully recognize who the person was, which in some cases I did not.
You didn't recognize the voice necessarily?
How about when I was done with the reading and turned around and looked at them, I didn't recognize them.
Oh, well, must not have been a very big celebrity then.
Well, let's just say some of them were celebrities at a certain time period. And thankfully the stage manager would always be able to see my expression and be like, John, let me introduce you to, or let me formally introduce you to.
Let's talk a little about psychic abilities and the psychic phenomenons and stuff. Is a psychic reading similar to hypnosis in the sense that your subject has to be an open and willing participant? You know how they always say people can only be hypnotized if they want to be?
Yeah, no, I don't think so. I think that it has to do more with like somebody being able to be honest rather than closed. So, for example, like if I was to, read for somebody, the information that's going to come through is going to be through my process. So I'm going to see, hear, and feel energy, and then I have to interpret it. And what I like to do is make sure that I deliver the information first, say it out loud, get it out of me, and then ask the person then, do you understand this? Do you understand that? After I've said it. So if I'll give you an example. There was a actual celebrity who asked me if they could send their assistant to one of my events. So I was like, sure. She came. Well, she had lost both her parents, but her mom had passed when she was young, but her father had passed years later. And the message that came through was, even though your dad passed years later, when you lost your mom, you lost both parents. And she said, no, that's not true. And I said, no, I understand that your dad passed years later, but the message your dad is expressing to me is he's almost apologizing, saying that when mom passed, you kind of lost him too. Now, there was no other way for me to be able to state that message. There was no other way for me to interpret what she was showing me and what he was showing me. But this woman would not accept that as fact. So I just said to her, I go, I don't know how else to say it. I go, so I'm gonna leave that with you. I said, but you understand everything else that I'm saying? She goes, yeah, everything else you're saying is spot on. She goes, but not that. So I just sat back and said, okay, but this is an example of somebody who did not want to accept the fact that her dad was owning that when mom died, he basically, became a little bit absentee as a dad. She needed to have in her mind what her relationship was like. Now, if nothing else made sense, I would have then said, okay, I could be misinterpreting this, but she understood everything else that was coming through. So you kind of look at the validation of what's happening. But she was an unwilling participant to validate something, even though she validated everything else. So a lot has to do with the honesty that somebody's going to have. And do they want to hear from that person or not? Like, if I'm sitting with somebody who wants to hear from their father and their ex-mother-in-law comes through, they're not happy. Like, nobody wants to hear from their ex-in-laws.
Perhaps she, the father felt like he abandoned her emotionally when the mother died or something, and maybe she didn't feel that way.
Yeah, no, she made it very clear to me and the rest of the room for about a half hour, like that was exactly the case for her. But the reality is, if you stand outside and it's raining, you're going to get wet. And that's how I see. I'm pretty black and white. And I say this openly. I'm OCD in my process. Like, I have to explain it to people in the beginning. Like, I'm not about making people feel good or performing a reading. Like, you'll see mediums perform a reading. Like, I have a man here. That's not me. My dad was a New York City police officer. It's like I'm very, very deliberate with how I say stuff. I read with a skeptical mindset, and I try to be as analytical as possible. And I make sure that I'm not affecting any type of reaction of a person, because I feel like how a person, and in this case, the one I'm using, how a person feels about the reading is completely up to them. And if that's how she felt, I respect that. But I always want to make sure that I'm just delivering information as opposed to emotion.
All right. Tell us a little about, I'm kind of curious about this. How did you first realize that you had a certain psychic ability? Because people who don't have it don't even understand what it is particularly, or what it feels like. How did you know I got something that's different from...
I was told. I was actually told.
You were told?
I was told, yep. A woman by the name of Lydia Clark was doing readings at my grandmother's house. My mom's side of the family used to have psychics come over. And remember Tupperware parties?
Sure, yeah.
Right. Think Tupperware, take out the Tupperware, throw in a psychic. That's pretty much what they would do. They would do like a couple times a year for fun on a Saturday or Sunday. And, they would make a day out of it, and people would have coffee and cake. And it was like that kind of a fun girl thing that they did. But my dad didn't want me to be around it, didn't really like it, and I had adopted his philosophy that, my mom and her family were a little bit crazy when it came to the subject matter. So I didn't grow up believing in it. I kind of had a little bit of an attitude towards it. And I used to tease my mom when she would get read and she would come back and tell me what they would say. I would literally poke holes at it really, really well. Like, I would make a joke out of almost everything, to the point that I would get in trouble. So at the age of 15, when this woman agreed, after doing a reading for my mom, I'm giving you the abridged version here, but something had happened with me. She had tuned into something very accurately regarding my health, which turned out to be fine. It was a health scare. But my mom invited her to come to the house to do a house party, and the woman said, I don't really do that. She said, however, I will make an exception under one condition. And my mom said, name it. She goes, I want to meet your son. So my mom came home, and I was like 15. She said, okay, so here's the deal. This woman, Lydia, the one I told you about, and I was like, yeah. She goes, she agreed to come to Grandma's house to do a house party. And then she gave me the don't roll your eyes kind of speech. She said, but there's one condition. I said, what's the caveat? She goes, she wants to meet you. And I remember laughing, going like, what? I'm like, why would she want to meet me? And my mom said, I don't know. She said, but I told her that that you would be here. She goes, and I expect you to be on your best behavior and be polite. I was like, of course. But I was and I still am, I was a very sarcastic sophomore in high school. Long story short, she came, and it was an amazing day because one by one people went up to the room, and one by one they came down, and I equate it to the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, except it was more like personality was gone. Like, they would go up all okay, let's see what's going to happen, and then they would come down like a little glazed over, and I was like, what the hell? So then my cousin Roseanne went, and she's 13 years older than I am, but she looked like a teenager. And she was married, she had lost a child, she had a daughter, and a couple times she had readings done before, and they'd be like, the next boy you're going to meet. So she and I were kind of like, we were always the person who were making fun of the psychics. She came down and was like, holy crap, this woman's amazing. And I'm like, stop. Why is she so amazing? I was like, come on, Ro. And she's like, no, really, she's amazing. So I said, tell me what she said. And she started telling me the details, and I was like, all right. She goes, you need to go. And I said, no, I'm not going to go, but thank you. She goes, no, I'll pay for you to go. So I looked at my mom like, can I? And my mom gave me the look, the Italian eyebrow raised, like, you better be polite or I'll kick your ass when we're done. Like, all unspoken, but it was pretty much what she said. So I said, I will be polite. I go, but I'm not going to help her like you guys. So I went up to the room, and she took my high school ring, and she did something called psychometry. And psychometry is where you hold on to an object. And there's two different types. There's objective psychometry and subjective psychometry. So she did subjective psychometry. She was reading me, the subject. She did not look at me. She closed her eyes, held my ring, and just started giving me information. And the first thing that she said to me was that the reason why she was there today was to put me on my path, that I had highly evolved beings of white and gold light, and that I was going to change the way millions of people saw her subject matter. Now, I'm very happy that she wasn't looking at me, because I had that moment of, like, nervous laughter. Like, I couldn't control myself, because I thought it was an odd, it was an odd lead-in kind of statement. Like, really? This is what you're starting with? Like, we're not going to talk about, like, girls or anything like that. We're going to jump right into, like, I got, like, invisible beings of light. You want to, like, really? But she was so serious and so professional that my laughter kind of, like, shifted to, like, as if the principal of the school kind of, like, walked in, and I had to, like, kind of, like, take it more seriously. So she made me pay attention to what she was saying. But in my head, I'm like, strike one. The next part she gave me was information that was, I thought specific, but then my logic was kind of like, unbraiding everything she was saying, and I'm like, I could think of like 4 other guys in high school that I could apply this to. So for me, that was like strike 2. And then the last part was where she like literally like grand slammed it out of the park, because she gave me information that she would have had to have been with me. Like, she would have had to have been there to know what she knew. And then she gave me outcomes to situations that nobody in my family knew about. So, like, that freaked me out a little bit. So she got my attention. She really got my attention. And I basically thought, okay, she's a mind reader. She was able to somehow get in my head and know the stuff that she knew. And then she, like, fluffed up the other stuff, and, everybody's psychic. So when I got out of the room, I started asking people, like, did she tell you were psychic? And they were like, no. I'm like, did she tell anybody else that had, like, lights around them? And they were like, no. They were like, why? Did she tell you that? And I was embarrassed. I was like, no. But then I had later confided to my mom. I was like, is this woman for real? Because, like, this is what she said. And it was from that reading that I got, ignited. Like, my curiosity was piqued. So I went to the public library, and I was embarrassed to check the books out. And I sat on the floor because they were under the occult section. And I read every book that they had after high school every day. I just went there and just read and read and read and read. And what I learned is that everybody's psychic. Everybody has intuition. It manifests in different ways. And most people don't realize that it's their intuition or psychic ability, because, Hollywood's done a really big job to make it seem like it's much larger than it is. That was my journey. That's how I started.
Your mom knew this woman. Did your mom have any kind of psychic abilities?
I think she did. I really think she did. She said no. But, like, she would, like, know stuff, and I would always call her out on it, too. I'd be like, how did you know that? And her standard answer to me was always, because I'm your mother and I know you. That was exactly what she would say. And I'd be like, yeah, but how'd you know that? And I remember we were watching, I don't know if you remember the TV show, Canon.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay, we were watching Canon. And I remember very clearly sitting on the floor playing with toys, and Canon was on, and she turned around and she was like, blah, blah, blah. And then it happened. And I went, how did you know that? And she goes, I could just tell. I'm like, yeah, but I'm watching the same thing you're watching, and I can't just tell. So there were moments. My grandmother, her mom, absolutely. Whenever my grandmother would put up her finger and she would say something like, mark my words, you could pretty much write down that it was going to happen, and by the way, it was always bad. It was always negative. My grandmother's finger would go up. I'd be like, no, not the finger.
This was one of my questions to you, was that if you thought that psychic abilities was something in your DNA or something you're just born with, or can somebody actually develop this? I mean, can you go to school and learn how to develop your psychic abilities?
So I'm going to tell you, I think both.
Both?
I think both, yeah. So, like, equate it to music. People can sing, and then people can sing. But, people who can sing could actually study voice and learn how to control the instrument to make a better sound. But then there are people who can sing, right?
Right, no lessons, nothing. Just right out of the womb they could sing like that. Yeah.
They could just sing.
Yeah.
And then when they get the training, they could really sing. So I think I like to look at psychic ability as just that. It's an ability. And somewhere along the lines, human ego has gotten in the way, and psychic ability, the ability dropped, and the word gift got added in. I hate the word gift. And the reason why is that it makes it seem like one person's more special or better than another. And I don't like that, because I feel like for me, as a teacher of the subject matter, I want everybody that I'm talking to recognize that everybody's intuitive and everybody's psychic. And this way that they could pay attention to what's happening around them in their lives. Because that's what intuition is for, to give you a heads up about what's happening. It's no different than the amplified instinct of survival. It's like when someone is paying attention to something, they're feeling, like, what are they feeling? And I'll always tell, like, if I'm dealing with a young client, and I'll say to them, like, when you meet someone, honor what it is that you feel about them when you first meet them. Because what you're meeting is their energy first. Then you're going to meet the personality that they want you to see. But honor what your feeling is. And if you meet somebody and they just don't feel right to you, I go, don't lose that. There's something that's not right there that you should pay attention to. And I try to always make sure that with my kids, like, they know that. Like, when you meet someone, I don't care if it's a teacher or if it's a friend, whatever, pay attention to how you feel around a person or a circumstance, because there's a reason you're feeling that. And it doesn't mean that you're 100% right, but I still want you to pay attention to it. Like, if you're driving your car and a light starts flashing, I don't want you to pull over and repair it, but I want you to pay attention. Something's up. Pay attention to what you're seeing. What's the signal that you're receiving? What might be off?
Okay, well, that makes sense. Yeah, I think there are people that just give off really bad energy, and I think we've all kind of encountered people like that. I know I have. And just for no particular reason, I've been in groups or meeting somebody or whatever, and it wasn't their appearance, they didn't smell bad or whatever, but you just got this feeling like, I don't want to be around this guy. And I couldn't explain why, but there was definitely, the feeling was there. So yeah.
I call that, when I teach workshops, I call that smelly energy. That's what I call it. They have smelly. They have smelly energy, and people look at me and go, "Smelly energy." I go, "Yeah." I go, "If you were sitting on a subway and somebody, like, was a homeless guy and they hadn't bathed in like 6 months, would you want to sit next to that?" And they go, "No." I go, "Right, because you can understand the sense of smell and what that would be like." I go, "But energetically, it's no different. It's another sense, and you'll have a reaction." I remember meeting somebody. It was a friend of mine's, new boyfriend, and they were like hot and heavy, and it was all great. And I wound up meeting them, believe it or not, in a church. So I was 3 or 4 pews behind them. And I'm looking at this guy. I can't see his face. I'm just looking at him from behind. And I was repulsed. Like, literally, I had this, like, oof, like, not good. And I thought, like, this is not good. And then I said something to my wife. I was like, ooh, this is not good. This is not a good guy. And then 2 weeks later, when we formally met at a party, his personality kind of came out. And he literally got me to think, he got me to not trust my feeling. I was like, oh, maybe I was wrong. He's a nice guy. Like, wow, he's affable, he's nice. We kind of have, like, a lot of similarities, like only a couple of years apart. And my wife looked at me and she's like, are you talking yourself out of liking him or into liking him? Like, what's going on here? I'm like, I don't know, maybe I was off. And she's like, well, it's not like you to, not trust your instinct. I was like, yeah. I said, I always say I could be wrong. Like I was doing that whole thing. Well, guess what? Just a few years later, I just needed a couple more time for him, a little more years to go by for him to reveal he was exactly who I originally felt without having to talk to him. So I always tell people it's really important to pay attention to how you feel, because sometimes when you're given information, the logic of that could make you talk yourself into something.
Well, I liked your analogy about the smelly energy, because again, what you said about people have that sense of, oh, I don't know if I like this guy or whatever. But that energy is something that we're not necessarily equipped to understand, as well as the stinky guy on the subway. So I think that's a very good analogy, and I think that might help with people who are somewhat skeptical about the whole concept of psychic abilities. One of the questions I wanted to ask you also, you've been on a ton of talk shows and interview shows. You were on Larry King Live, and Regis and Kathy probably I don't have a list, but I'm just guessing which shows you were probably on.
I've been on most of them. I haven't been on the Tonight Show, but I've been on most.
Okay, yeah, maybe the Today Show or the Morning Show, whatever, right? When you've gone on those shows, are they more interested in trying to discredit you, or are they more interested in trying to explore the possibility that some people might actually have psychic abilities?
It depends upon the show, and it depends upon the producer. It depends upon where they're coming from. One of the things that I remember when I was doing Crossing Over, one of the news magazine shows, like 2020 Dateline, was doing a piece, and the executive producer of Crossing Over said to me, "Why are you doing this?" And I said, "What do you mean?" I said, I want to teach, like I want to get information out. I go, it's like 2020 or whatever it was. And he looked at me and he shook his head and he goes, "I don't think you should do that." And I trusted him, but I was already like down the path a piece. And I said to him, "Can I ask you why?" He said, "Because their story's already done." And I looked at him, I was like, no, we haven't shot anything. We're just talking. And he goes to me, "Trust me, their story's done." He goes, "They're just going to shoot you to get the pieces that they want for their story." And I was like, no. I was like, dee, and I go into the interview, and he couldn't be more accurate. It's like literally they shot for the pieces, asked the questions that they wanted, took clips of readings that, they wanted to put in there. And it was pre the internet being the internet when I did it. And it was really interesting that when the show aired, the people that I read that were there actually went on message boards to complain and say, "Guys, that's not what happened. Like, you didn't show what happened." And the reason why this stands out for me, and I believe it was Bill Ritter from ABC's 2020, I remember saying to him and his producer, "This doesn't make any sense. Like, what I'm seeing doesn't make any sense." And he's like, "What are you saying?" I go, "I see you covering Nazis, like modern Nazis." I go, "Are you guys doing like a docudrama on like World War II?" And he goes, "No." And very flippant and very not answer me. And I remember being just so perplexed because I was like seeing Nazi paraphernalia. I was seeing like swastikas, and I'm like, but it was modern. And I'm like, this is crazy. I go, it's like, you guys, I said to them, I write out to them, I go, "You're going to cover Nazis again in some weird way." And they rolled their eyes. So, last year when Charlottesville happened, and, and you look at Twitter and you look at social media and you see the rise of anti-Semitism and like Nazi stuff that's appearing all over the place. Like just yesterday, there was a school in California that apparently did something with high school kids in Orange County, put like a Nazi swastika with like the red cups, and did the salute. And every time I see that, like I have to control myself to not like send it to like Bill Ritter and be like, "Hey, remember this?"
Overall, if you had to surmise, would it be about 50-50? Like half the people are into what you're doing and the other half are trying to cut you down?
No, I'm going to say it's actually a lot better than that. I'm going to say about 85 to 90% of the time, people treat me with respect and objectivity, or they feign it really well. And then there's that 10 to 15% where it's just the exact opposite, where it's the story and the narrative that they want to tell.
Okay.
And I always say openly, like, I do have an entire episode of South Park dedicated to me. Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was pretty bad. I didn't see it, but, I read the blip about that. So I'm glad you can take it in good spirit.
But here's my perspective. My perspective is, was it fun to be the biggest douche in the universe? No. Is it cool to have that? I'm going to tell you it is today. And the reason why it is today is because I really don't have a presence. Like, I'm not on TV. Like, I don't do media, really. I tour and I see my clients. And people find me by word of mouth. Well, guess what? Those shows make people go, "Well, who's John Edward?" And then those people, those usually kids, go to YouTube. After they go to YouTube, then they come to my social media. So it actually raises awareness. So I think that even negative shows where they do, nothing positive on it, starts a dialogue. And I think that we're living at a time where it's really important because, anybody who has a device in their hands basically has a show or a network, and what they put out makes them a broadcaster. So people could disseminate information in a fraudulent way. They could say that they're psychic and not be. So I think as much as I don't like being included in those pieces, I don't get upset because I actually sometimes want to be like, these people need to be included. Like, that needs to be looked at, or that needs to be looked at. So I understand that I'm part of a niche mentality, and with that I get swept up in it. But I think it serves a purpose.
Well, and then the old saying about bad publicity is better than no publicity. So
I'd rather have no publicity, to be honest. I mean, that's the God's honest truth. I'd rather not be talked about. Like, you can, like, leave me out. I know, like, I remember about 7 or 8 years ago, could be even 10 now, when, like, the whole new slew, like the next generation of psychic shows made it to the airwaves. And every time there was a piece of media done, or mostly the written stuff, it was mostly things that were written, they would slam me and then promote the show. And after the fifth or sixth time where it happened, I was like, what the hell? Why are we kicking the kicking the old dog because there's a puppy in the house? I'm like, leave the old dog alone. Go pick on the puppy.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's nuts. Well, personally for me, I have like a optimistic I don't know. And if you don't mind, I just want to tell you a very quick story.
Sure.
Before this happened, I was probably like you as a teenager, where I was skeptical and I didn't believe in any magic. And what happened was my father passed away, and my mother didn't want to stay in the house because it was too sad for her and she wanted to get out. So we rented the house. The woman that came to rent the house came from 2,000 miles away, across the country. She had relocated her job, blah, blah, blah. This was long before the internet. This was in the early 80s. About 3 months go by, we get a letter from her. And she says, you're going to think I'm nuts, but 3 o'clock in the morning, I heard a noise in the kitchen. I got up, I went to the kitchen, I turned on the light, and there was a man standing in the kitchen. I freaked out. I looked away for a second, and when I looked back, he was gone. She described my father to a T. I mean, and the funniest part was she described his glasses. He had those big kind of plastic rim glasses, and I mean, how many ghosts do you know wear glasses? Have you ever seen any ghosts wear glasses? Right? But she described, and my father was not he wasn't a freaky looking guy, but he was really tall. He was 6'3". He was very skinny, bald head, kind of ears that stuck out, and big glasses.
Poor woman, probably scared the crap out of her.
Oh yeah, and she why would she do that? First of all,
but wait. So now let's look at the logic of it. She had this experience. Why would she think to write to you guys?
Well, because
she was compelled to.
I guess because she was renting our house, or my family's house, but it didn't make sense, because if we had thought, oh God, this woman's a nut job, and we try to get her out, but she didn't want to move. She didn't say, oh, I can't stay in a house like this. I'm getting out, because she had signed a year's lease. She stayed the year's lease and then moved after that. But it just was strange. Then she, this was like a 3 or 4 page letter. And
I think that's awesome.
We did not respond to it because we didn't know what to say. My mother and I were both freaked out. She was like, oh my God, she just saw the ghost of your father. And then it never happened again. Nothing ever.
No, but Douglas, the part that I think is really important is that she had the experience, but she knew where to put it. So your dad appearing to her wasn't just the visual, it was downloading information to her, because she knew where to put it. Because I'm sure this woman has other people she's connected to in her life, and she could have went to any number of people and said, oh my God, this guy's in the house. I don't think it's just logical to say, unless she knew your dad died in that house, that type of thing. Like, I had an experience where I left the house that I was living in, and I walked out, and there was a so when you walk down the path to get to where my car was parked, like a pad for your driveway pad, there was a big evergreen tree there. So I looked, and I thought it was the landscaper, because he had on a red plaid shirt, and I wanted to actually ask him to trim something. So I was like, excuse me. And I go running around the tree where he was, and there was nobody there. Now, wow. I can tell you, as I'm describing this to you right now, it was just like as if I saw it like 2 minutes ago. It was the clearest back of this guy. Well, the guy that lived in the house before me. I think that's who I saw.
Yeah, and he's dead, presumably, right?
Yes. Yep. However, in the house before that I lived in, the owners were the only ones who lived in the house. They moved. Nobody died in the house. and I would actually sense their energy inside the house, and they were live. So I know that there's also a buildup of residual energy. But I think that's really cool that she took the time to actually write the letter, and how cool of a validation for you and your mom.
She didn't know who he was. She said, I saw a man, and then she described him, and my mother and I were just like, oh my God, it's Dad. You know?
That's so cool. I love
She didn't know, because this was, like I said, it was long before the internet. She didn't have a social media page to look at or anything like that. There were no pictures in the paper of him in the obituary. So she couldn't have possibly known. I don't think my mother said anyone died in the house. You only have to do that if you are going to buy it. I think the law says you have to say if someone died in the house, but I don't think you do if you're going to rent. I think
I didn't even know that was a law.
In some states it is. If somebody died in the house, you've got to disclose that when you go to sell it. Anyways, we got to move along a little bit here.
Okay.
Let's see. Let's promote your. You've got two shows on the Psychic John Edward on Facebook Watch, and then Evolve, John's web series, online community. What's the difference between these two shows?
Well, Facebook was kind of like an opportunity just to kind of show people like, hey, still here, still doing it. You know, every now and again I would get people to be like, oh, what do you do now? I'd be like, oh, I'm a plumber now. What do you mean, what do I do? I'm doing the same thing I did before. Because people think, like, you know, if you're on TV, you only exist on TV. And I'm like, I had a 15-year career before there was a show. So I had the opportunity to do that, and I wanted to show people like a window into, like, again, the live events. And then Evolve is an online subscription, and it's way more than readings. It's a command, kind of like it's evolved, like a command. So it's giving people information and having interviews like we're doing with people who are authors, other metaphysical practitioners, just to give people tools to help them navigate like their life. And I do we're on season 13, I think we're going into season 13 of Evolve.
Season 13,
we're shooting now.
Okay.
Yep.
Give us the website for that so people can come to check it out.
Sure. People can go to johnedward.net and look for the Evolve portion. It's right on there.
Okay. And your Facebook is...
I don't know.
You don't know? So if they search the Psychic John
you know
Edward...
What? Just go to johnedward.net. I'm sure there's links for that there, too. I'm not very Facebook savvy.
Okay. Well, that's good. Well, listen, we got to wrap this up. We've kind of even gone over, but that's all right.
Well, it's a good conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for coming on the show. Best of luck with all
the best
your projects. All right. Take care, John.
Bye-bye.